again, as I was trying to emphasize, another element of the social enterprise ecosystem is the way in which, in some instances, you've got a global pooling of resources and information. One of the other things that this global alliance does, it maps the markets in each country. So you can go on their website and see how likely it is that you'd be able to market clean cook stoves in that particular country. Okay, so that's cook stoves. Moving on to a different sustainable development goal. This is a UK social enterprise. This is a different model. So here, when you buy something, in this case, it's water, and both the glass and the plastic that are used used as containers are both from recycled materials. But the main element, the main sort of selling point of Belu is that all its net profits go to WaterAid, and WaterAid is so this is another model of social enterprise and it's the same as that we had with cabbages and condoms, where the profits from an enterprise go to a charitable cause. Okay, and in this case they go to WaterAid, which is an excellent example of a very tightly focused NGO, which is highlighting the difference in price of water. So in the UK we only pay 7 pence for 50 litres, and whereas in Papua New Guinea you have to pay £1.84 from a water delivery service. And WaterAid are working to try and remediate that situation, to lower the price of water, because it's the stuff of life. And at the other end, not quite the other end, but dealing with waste has traditionally been one of the key elements of environmental sustainability. And there are some horrendous examples of what to do with the pile of waste. Okay, and so this is an Indian social enterprise which is providing a number of products and services to do with sorting the waste into different categories. And this is important in those places where this isn't mandated by government. Okay, and a different example of social enterprise in the waste sector is the waste pickers of Bogota in Colombia, and this is an example of a PSE, a formerly public sector enterprise. So the waste pickers used to be employed by government in the 1970s with financial so-called liberalisation. That service was sold off, it was got rid of, and it became a private sector business. But the waste pickers who had been employed kept themselves organised and formed an association, and so they now have a cooperative organisation which ensures that the people who are employed to sort and pick the waste are paid a reasonable wage, so that it's not. So that is a mutual interest as well as a former public sector enterprise. And finally, on waste, in a lot of places, this is in Kenya. You have you can't see the picture very well, but this is a ditch full of rubbish, and it is the ditch very often through which lots of human waste flows. And in Kenya and other countries, there you have the phenomenon of excuse me if I tell you this, but it's called the flying toilet, which is human waste in a plastic bag that is just then thrown away. And some of them, a lot of them end up here. So to counter that, they have these bio-centres. It's essentially a public toilet, but you pay. It's a social enterprise. And people do, and they work, because they recognise that it's important to improve the cleanliness, to lower the sources of disease for their children primarily. And so people pay to go to these bio-centres, and the human waste is treated and is then a source of fuel. So in this one, this is a women-only bio-centre, because of course going to the toilet is something that's very, very gender sort of specific, and it can be, public toilets can be places where women feel quite threatened. So in some examples they set up women-only ones, and the human waste is used to power cook stoves and in the places above. Okay, so that's quite a different. Breathe out now. A slightly different. Again, to demonstrate that a lot of social enterprises are really quite big businesses. So this is something called Hackney Community Transport, which started out providing community minibuses for people. Especially, for instance, minibuses for elderly people who needed to go to the shops or who needed to go to the hospital. And they've grown. With the deregulation of what were formerly publicly owned bus companies in the UK, they have now taken on some public bus services, and they're now a very substantial enterprise. So the turnover of the order of, I think it's in the 50 million, something like that. I think it's more. One of the interesting aspects about they're receiving investment in order to grow. They have a lot of social enterprises in this, particularly in this sort of bracket, do find it quite hard to find growth investment for growth. And they last year received a £500,000 investment from another social enterprise, which is called the Phone Co-op, which is a member-owned cooperative providing telephone services, broadband services, and it also provides. It also is the only place in the UK to sell a social enterprise mobile phone called the Fairphone. I should have put a slide up. The Fairphone is a wonderful thing. It's because, as you might not know, mobile phones have some very rare elements that are necessary for the functioning of the mobile phone, elements like coltan. And they've got 4 cars. One of them is electric only, so it plugs in, it's an electric car. And you go on the website to book your car for an hour or 3 hours or 4 hours, whatever, So it's and you pay an annual subscription, and it's quite a low. It's a pretty low rate, and it's an excellent thing. But the people I know in the town where I live, they're always able. They're always able to find one, a car available pretty much when they need it. For commuting to work, that's a different question. I think, that's a sort of an element of the work patterns that is probably better solved by public transport. Really. Okay, moving into health and Wellbeing, another of the, I think it's Sustainable Development Goal number 3, I believe. This is anybody know who this is? It's Bono from U2. Well known as supporting international development, aid and things like that. And he has partnered, he's been roped in by an Australian guy called Brian, what's his name, Brian somebody or other, that is using the sale of spectacles, fashionable spectacles, to fund the training of eye care workers, optometrists, people who can diagnose eyesight, people who can then treat. Also, also funding the treatment of preventative eye care. Because of course, if you can't see, it's really difficult to work. And another well-known example of and this is also one of the best-known examples of social franchising. So that is a social enterprise which sets up a business model that can then be replicated, but through the form of a franchise. So this Aravind has essentially McDonaldized the treatment of eye cataracts, which is the cause of over 50% of blindness globally. And the treatment of eye cataracts is really simple, or at least they've made it really simple. And in fact, a lot of people travel to India to have eye cataract operations because they have perfected it. They've got it down to a fine art. And so it is spreading across India through a franchise system. So people will pay to set up their own eye clinic, and so that provides employment. And it means, because it's a social franchise operation rather than a vast organisation, it cuts down the overhead costs of the operation in total. And another healthcare, again in India, but this is focusing on primary healthcare. And again, this is another example why the category of public sector social enterprise is quite an important part of the lexicon when we're looking at social enterprises. So the way that Karuna works is through public-private partnerships with local governments, local state governments, and they develop primary healthcare centres. So they're now operating in 7 states: Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Rajasthan. And so they're now employing over 1,000 healthcare professionals. So this is in situations where the local authority, for whatever reason, and there are always all sorts of different reasons, but where the local authorities are not sufficiently providing primary health care. So Aravind works with them through their expertise in healthcare management, essentially. Okay, so that's health. And a different part of the Sustainable Development Goals is labour conditions. And one of the major global problems in labour conditions is the employment of child labour. And so this organisation, Goodweave, is a certification, so it's a bit like fair trade. It's a certification organisation which certifies that the rugs that you buy that have the Goodweave label have not been manufactured using child labour. So again, that's what we're sort of seeing is a number of different elements of the social enterprise ecosystem and a number of different models, a number of different ways in which one can implement, develop a social enterprise. You don't have to be buying and selling stuff. You can be certifying other people's production. There are lots and lots of examples of websites which are championing change makers, individual social entrepreneurs or groups of people who have got who have developed a social enterprise or a social innovation. Most of them, well, nearly all of them, as far as I can see, nearly all of those news websites like Social Good, there's one called Good Start, I think. There's a number of them, but they're nearly all based in the global north. And Antico is the only one that I've come across so far, which is a social enterprise news website, if you like, that is originated from the global south. So it started in South Africa, hence its name, Antico. And they are funded by Red Bull. So this is, of course, Red Bull doing their corporate social responsibility bit, which again is a useful source of income. It shouldn't be ignored. For any social enterprise, plugging into the CSR, the corporate social responsibility funds of major corporations is an important aspect for a lot of people, a lot of social enterprise. Having said that, I did hear recently that the trend with corporate social responsibility is for the person who is the director of CSR in major corporations. Their name is changing to be Director of Sustainable Development. So that's another useful thing to bear in mind. Okay. So another area of sustainable development, ecotourism. And this is an example from Cuba, and it's a diving school. It's a national park, which is about 70 kilometers of that, that's most of it. As you know, a lot of coral reef is being damaged through scuba diving, through tourists diving and messing up the ecology, the ocean ecology. And so he's an Austrian social entrepreneur. He has worked with the Cuban government to develop a diving school which polices the park, and that's the marine park, and limits the number of divers to only 1,200 per year. And as a result, this is now the best conserved piece of coral reef in the whole Caribbean. Elsewhere in the Caribbean, they've seen really disastrous deterioration of coral reef. And as you know, coral reef is an important part of this. Another, again based on diving, this is a social enterprise called Blue Ventures, and they sort of trade on the desire of people to learn to dive, scuba diving, and to do it in somewhere exotic, Madagascar, and to do it at the same time as doing some good. So what the divers do is part of their work when they're diving, when they're learning to dive, is to map the ocean ecosystem, counting a particular breed of fish, for instance, or something like that. And the Blue Ventures also works with the coastal communities whose livelihoods depend upon fishing, to help them to develop ways of fishing and harvesting the marine resources more sustainably. So, for instance, through mapping, counting the populations of this or that or the other particular type of fish or seafood, and it has been recognised for the good work they're doing by a number of national awards. So again, this is a different, slightly sort of different model of social enterprise. You're sort of combining a number of different elements of sustainable development, working with communities in the production and the production sort of side, the primary production side, to devise more sustainable ways of fishing. And another example of ecotourism. This again is from Cuba. This is an eco-village. And eco-villages are an interesting phenomenon. Some of them are not so good. This one's really good. This is actually it used to be a coffee plantation. And what they've done is to convert the terraces, so the whole sort of valley is cut into terraces. That's why it's called Las Terrazas. And so they've converted those terraces they're continuing to grow coffee there, but they're growing other things as well, and they're doing it in a way which isn't intensive, it isn't damaging the environment, and it is also a very popular tourist resort. And a commentator from The Guardian went to visit a few years ago, quite a few years ago, and commented on their charmingly naive mix of being geared up for tourism and unaware of how to market themselves. And really, I mean, when I visited there, my impression was they didn't need to market themselves. In fact, what they do, there is such a high demand from visiting tourists, non-Cubans, to go and visit the place, that they have brought in a sort of a voluntary law or regulation of prohibition. They say that on Sundays only Cubans can visit, and Sundays is a really busy day. There are a lot of Cubans because what they do is they have lots of educational information about conserving the ecosystem and conserving the ecology, and about how the village is self-sustaining and things like that. And it's also a great place to go because there's a lovely river and you can go swimming and things. It's lovely. So, as I said, there is a global eco-village network, and it has to be said, I was at a conference a few months ago and heard a presentation from an anthropologist who'd been working with an eco-village in Portugal, and it really was not that great because it was mainly populated by sort of a retired Western middle-class people who wanted to feel that they were sort of living somewhere ecologically friendly, but it had no connection with the local community. They were sort of pretty much cut off. It was sort of like a nice sort of heartwarming thing to be able to say that you are living sort of ecologically in an ecologically sound village, but it's not socially sustainable. It might be environmentally sustainable, and it was definitely economically sustainable because the way that this one in Portugal was funded was that they put on training courses for people to go and come and train for a week in yoga or permaculture or something like that. When you look through the the various different eco-villages within the global eco-village network, it's not that easy from the way that this is set up to tell which are the ones which are more socially sustainable. So this is an example of a sort of global, a global sort of aggregation body that's pulling together all the various different eco-villages, but it's not operating in a very accountable manner. Accountability is, just like with traceability, is a fundamental, a key part of the social sustainability of organisations. If we don't know what they're doing, how do we know that they're doing the right thing? You see what I mean? Okay, and here is an ecotourism with a different twist in Thailand. I came across it just the other day, and what they try to do is to ensure that when people when tourists go to a town or a village, that the places where they're eating and the places where they're staying are places which are putting money back into the local communities. They're not. What they try to do is to ensure that the money that tourists spend to visit a community goes to that community. It's not sort of sucked out by a global multinational somewhere. Okay, and one of the key elements for sustainable tourism and eco-villages is the extent to which people working and living on the land have control or ownership of the land. And a phenomenon that is emerging in the UK and the US is something called a community land trust, which is where, again, we had an example in the town I live in Somerset. There was 2 fields which are sort of have traditionally been places where people go to exercise and to walk and to have picnics, to have a game of football or something like that. But they're fields, they're not parks. They're fields that used to be owned by a farmer. The farmer decided that he wanted to sell the land and was looking for permission to build housing. And so the community said, actually, we want to keep this land. And so they were able to collectively buy the land from the farmer. They were able to, they were able to pool their investments. Some people invested small amounts of money, other people invested larger amounts of money, and different community land trusts work in different ways. But very often it's on the principle, it's on the sort of cooperative principle that each investor has just one vote, rather than the number of votes depending on the size of your investment. So that's a community land trust. Another example, and so this brings me on to talking about cooperatives. And Ban Ki-moon stated recently that cooperatives are a key way of ensuring the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, because the way that they work is in tune with the notion of sustainable development. So it's about community ownership, community accountability, and responsibility. This is an example from the energy field. So through through a tax incentive that is unfortunately now being phased out in the UK, but we've had for a number of years a particular tax incentive for renewable energy schemes, and that has seen an enormous growth in community energy societies. So this is one based in Brighton, and so one of the sort of examples that one of the ways in which a community energy society will work is to say, we will install solar panels on your town hall, or on your school, or on your office building, if you'll let us. We will come to an arrangement. So what happens is the energy that is generated, some of it will be used to power the school or the town hall, but very often, especially when you've got a massive array like this, there will be surplus energy, which is then fed into the main energy grid, and there is the grid then pays the energy society a certain amount, so they're gaining income from the grid, which is and so that is the economic sustainability angle of community energy societies. At the end of the year, maybe, but they also elect the governing board that manages the cooperative. So that's